Hi, everybody. It's Mr. Heffern here, and I'm here to talk to you today about FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which was passed in the 1970s, been altered a few times since then, but still in effect and still affects us in our schools today, especially with regards to our students and student information. So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how this applies to us. So, first off, what is FERPA? It is, like I said, it's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which was passed in 1974, and it's a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student educational rights. And basically, parents are granted these rights until their child turns 18 years of age or once they attend a post-secondary educational or institution. So once they graduate high school and move on, if they're not 18 by then those rights will go away. But parents do have these rights until their kid turns 18 or until they attend an institution after high school. So again, that is what FERPA stands for, and it's basically here to protect the confidentiality of the students and their records. So how does this apply to us in our school? First off, this first bullet point here, FERPA applies to any school that receives federal funding from programs from the U.S. Department of Education. So that is us at St. Mary's Colgan. We do receive funds, federal funds, from different programs from the U.S. Department of Education. So we have to abide by FERPA if we want to receive these funds. So this FERPA does apply to us. And this second bullet point, access to student records should only be allowed if the requesting agency has a valid court order or subpoena in compliance with FERPA or immigration laws or regulations. So basically what this is saying is just that we cannot share any student information unless there's been a court order or for some reason like that. We don't have the power or we don't have the right to share student information to anybody or the public, etc. We have to have that. They have to have a court order or subpoena. Basically legal reasons to obtain that information. So the third bullet point here is a school may not deny access to public education for a student based on whether or not they're a citizen of this country. So we cannot judge or determine whether a student goes to our school based on whether they're a citizen of this country. There's certain things we can and cannot do with a student's information, and so that bottom point is one. But again, basically that second bullet point is the big one. We cannot share information about students just to anybody. Those are their rights. It's their privacy, and we do not have the power to share those rights unless there is a legal situation. Now, this can be complicated, and this is complicated. So first off, it's complicated because this was passed in the 1970s, 1974. It's been altered twice since it was first passed, and there have been over 120 different student privacy laws passed in 40 states since 2013. So just kind of like our government, it's constantly changing. It's constantly adding stuff and detracting stuff. So it can be a little bit confusing, and I don't want to bore you with all of the specifics of this today, but I want to give you a better understanding of this to make you informed and hopefully help you to prevent disobeying this law. So another reason it's complicated, here's a direct quote: in the event of an epidemic disease outbreak, which I thought was kind of fitting to what we're going through today with COVID, or a campus shooting, for instance, a school could legally share students' education records with certain personnel, law enforcement officers, etc. So it is complicated in certain situations. A big time hazard or epidemic or campus shooting, some type of situation like that, then it can be okay to share personal information and educational records. But just it's better, and there's a lot of legality to it, that we don't share information unless a certain situation arises. So another reason it's complicated, this third bullet point, images of students captured from surveillance camera footage can be classified as educational records. So it's okay for us to have surveillance cameras and videos in our schools, and that's okay. But we have to be careful with sharing those videos and those images that are caught on camera with just the public or certain people. So I was reading about one instance where a video was recorded from a phone of surveillance camera footage. So like a Snapchat, for instance, in today's world, a Snapchat video taken on surveillance footage from a school, and then that being sent to friends, people on that person's Snapchat, that would be illegal. So that is how it applies to us. And like this slide says, it can get complicated. There's a lot of stuff, especially with today's technology, that does make this a little bit complicated. So yeah, it is a very complicated issue. Some complaints. There's going to be complaints with this, and there are complaints, but FERPA does not give individuals the right to sue the school. So if someone thinks that we violate their FERPA rights, they cannot sue the school. They can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education, basically. And then the U.S. Department of Education can order sanctions and investigations to take legal action against schools, but FERPA does not give individuals the right to sue the school if we violate their educational rights. So if a parent or someone thinks that we have violated FERPA, then parents can file complaints, like I said, with the Department of Education, and then the Department of Education will move forward with that. The U.S. Department of Education can also investigate concerns on their own. They can issue warrants and dive into investigations to try to find out more and make sure that this law is being applied and upheld, but parents can file complaints with them as well. So that's kind of the legality to it and some specifics to it. It is complicated, but what can we do? This law it's a federal law. It does apply to us at our school at St. Mary's Colgan. So what can we do to help abide and follow that law and make sure we are not overstepping our boundaries? So first off, be careful what information we share in our classrooms with certain, whether it be vendors or apps or websites, etc., that we're doing for maybe schoolwork or a certain project or maybe a club or a yearbook club or whatever it may be. We should be careful of what information what websites and apps we are using, and then be careful with what information we share with certain apps, because we can be held liable if information is put on a site and then that site releases that information. Even though that site is the one that released the information, we, the school, can be held responsible for that information. So the second bullet point, FERPA does not require schools to follow any certain processes for destruction or disposition of an educational record once that kid or that student is no longer a member of the school. However, we still have to abide by FERPA once that student graduates. So just because a student graduates, then if something was leaked from them, some of their information, we still have to follow those rules and those laws and those regulations. So we cannot, after they graduate, we cannot share their information, and it's okay because they graduated. That is not okay. So we don't have to necessarily follow any certain specific rules or procedures for getting rid of their files, but even after they graduate, we are responsible for their information and not letting it get leaked out. And this bold point here, I understand this can be complicated and it can be confusing and it can seem like just one more thing for teachers and in a schools have to follow and think about and consider. And maybe a lot of you guys are thinking, oh, this will just kind of go to the back burner after this and we won't think much or say much about it, because oftentimes it's not a big issue, but I want you to be aware of the seriousness that this can have, and just a general kind of rule of thumb that I think we can abide by is what happens at the school stays at the school. And that might sound a little cheesy, like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but basically just to be on the safe side, don't share information about your students, don't share information about your kids' families with anyone at any time. Basically, it's I know those conversations come up within faculty and teachers as you're working with a certain kid, but try not to talk too much about the specifics of a kid outside of school. So when you get with your friends or your other family members or whatever the case may be, try not to share the information that you may know about a kid with anyone else, just to protect yourself and protect that kid, and just protect against all the legality of it. So what happens at the school stays at the school. Yeah, like I said, try not to share information that you learn about your kids outside of the school or the classroom. And again, I know this is complicated and there's a lot to this law. So one resource for help that teachers can reach out to is an online resource. It's called the PTAC, Privacy Technical Assistance Center. They have educational resources with info on data privacy, confidentiality, security practices, etc. They'll actually have opportunities to teach you about it, provide training. And then it's actually recommended by the U.S. Department of Education. So the U.S. Department of Education, the one who has passed this federal law on Ferpa, is giving us an opportunity or a resource to help educate ourselves on this. So hopefully we don't have any big issues with this. So this would be something to check out. Here are my resources for this presentation. Thank you guys for listening. Yeah. Have a good day.